there is a major problem today in athlete transition where whether it's mental health issues or just, somebody has spent their whole life practicing, playing, doing all this stuff. And then all of a sudden they get hurt or they're done college, or maybe they played some professionally, but then they're done. And now they've got 30, 40, 50, 60 years of life left and they're not sure what to do. So what we're trying to do is to bring in athletes and coaches and different people related to sports that might have gone through some of those issues, or maybe they didn't, but they're there to help teach and inspire these athletes. Like, hey, look what we can do today. How can we help you?
Rob, how are you? How have you been?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Rick and Hazel. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. 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 And so as always, folks, before we get started, I want to remind you, do not forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, make sure that you get updated every time we drop a show. And you know what? If you guys don't mind, let's get into it. Rob, again, you were on the show a year ago and you had Alumni Direct and you told us a little bit about that and what you're doing. What's been going on?
Yeah. So, I'm the CEO and founder of Alumni Direct, and we started the company kind of on the basis of helping alumni to network and connect through common affinity relationships. And it kind of started from a collegiate standpoint, universities and colleges. And we just saw a real need out there. I think now, especially a year later, there's a lot more noise on a lot of the social networks. And so we wanted to provide a community center where people can go with that relationship, but do a lot of things in one place, where whether it's connecting with each other, helping each other with, getting jobs. It could be posting a job as an alumni-owned business or getting a job as an alumni. It could also be creating events, mentoring. So there's a lot of different aspects of it. But what was interesting along the way, what we found is that alumni means a lot of things. Alumni could be kind of generic. So whether you could be a college alumni, you could be an alumni from a fraternity or sorority at a national level. You could be an alumni from a business alumni association. So think of somebody that back in the day worked for Blockbuster Video, and now this group of people get together and they talk about all those fun days at Blockbuster. But I think what's resonated most for us now is getting involved in the athlete world. Just saw a real need for helping athletes to network and connect. And what started with back up in South Florida in the Fort Lauderdale market, there was an attorney, sports attorney, said, athletes, you need to go out there and work together, go on LinkedIn. And I just saw this as an opportunity of let's get them to Alumni Direct in a private community where they can work together. So as it started kind of going into this, we looked at kind of the same token for college alumni, but imagine you're an athlete from a school. And maybe you went to a smaller school. I went to University of Delaware, which is a smaller school. So the real world, so to speak, or might not necessarily know that star player or even that average player from that college, but the alumni would. So it's kind of, finding a way to help to not only now current athletes with NIL, but also alumni athletes to promote themselves. So within our community centers, we're adding Athletes Corner. And that's an area, again, where these athletes can promote themselves and where alumni might, whether they use the service or not service, but they're kind of attracted by that whole athlete thing. So that's been a big part of, I'd say, a transformation of Alumni Direct. And then one other side note, and I know Rick and Hazel, you have some different kinds of questions, but we also started our own podcast. And so Rick and Hazel are going to teach me some things as I go through this, of course, that I can add to my show. But it's called Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. And the idea kind of is to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. And there is a major problem today in athlete transition where whether it's mental health issues or just, somebody has spent their whole life practicing and playing and doing all this stuff. And then all of a sudden they get hurt or they're done college, or maybe they played some professionally, but then they're done. And now they've got 30, 40, 50, 60 years of life left, and they're not sure what to do. So what we're trying to do is to bring in athletes and coaches and different people related to sports that might have gone through some of those issues, or maybe they didn't, but they're there to help teach and inspire these athletes. Like, hey, look what we can do today. How can we help you?
Yeah. Cool stuff. Cool stuff. I love that. I love that. I guess I wasn't a collegiate athlete. My little brother was, but I can definitely see See, I guess I've seen that transition. I've seen people have those conversations around, what's next. A good buddy of mine down in Florida, he's got a podcast, and he interviews a lot of ex pro athletes around the same conversation. It's really cool because sometimes you start, they're going into what they're getting into, whether it's financial management or whatever it is. What was from the beginning, I guess, what was your inspiration? What was your driver? I know you talked about just bringing folks together, but was there something behind that or something you saw?
Yeah, for me, I was involved with, starting, I was real involved with athletics with my son. Like I was a coach. I coached a travel baseball team for many years. And when I got out of that, it was kind of like, okay, well, what do I do next? And it's kind of interesting because we're talking about athletes transition, but it's also parents and coaches transitioning as well. But I got involved with my alumni club for the University of Delaware in South Florida. And it was a good club. We did a lot of social events, but I'm a business guy. My partners were business people. And we wanted to facilitate how, as alumni, can we work together and help each other with our businesses. So that was kind of the genesis. And when I looked at some of the other sites out there, like one of the things, a lot of these alumni relations departments from these schools, they have a site as well. But I think people tend to not necessarily go to them because they're afraid they're going to get hit up for money. A lot of times it kind of comes from, it's kind of fundraising versus what we're trying to do is friend raising. And so that's kind of what started it, is just, okay, well, how do we create this place? And not only creating the place where people go in that common interest, but where we can teach and help them the right way to network. Because I think a lot of people don't know how to network and connect. They kind of go in with the attitude like, hey, help me. Hey, Rick, can you help me? Hazel, help me. Whereas my philosophy has always been, I want to pay it forward. I want to help as many people as I can. And I think if you have that fostering spirit of helping others, ultimately will come back and help you.
That is so true, Rob. So I like what you said about paying it forward, versus reaching out to X number of people a day, kind of like what a traditional sales technique runs. So can you tell us more about that and how that concept plays out in Alumni Direct?
Yeah, I think to me, it's about that common ground. If you have the interest. So, as we talked about starting out with colleges and then these other areas we talked about athletes, is I think for me personally, if I'm in South Florida, so I'm about 1,200 miles away from the University of Delaware where I went. And when I meet a Delaware alumni, it's kind of like, wow, like how can I help you out? And I think it's because you have that, okay, we went to the same school, we probably grew up in the same area. There's that common interest. I think a lot of times people might go to they might go to a networking event. I mean, there's all different types of sales organization networking. I mean, some of the different ones I've gone to, it's kind of been almost like a scorecard where like, hey, I'm Rob and I introduced Rick to 25 people this week, and Rick got 5 new leads, and I got Hazel some new people. And I think if you're not, that you're starting something with common, you already step up. It's kind of like we talk about one of our sections on Alumni Direct is helping people get jobs from that alumni group. So imagine, I always use this, is if I'm interviewing 5 different people and they all have the same credentials, but one went to University of Delaware, chances are I'm going to hire the Delaware person. And I'm sure you would do the same for your school. So I think what's setting it apart and in the networking side is finding something that's in common. And, some of these other sites that you might go out to, you can connect with someone. Like, for example, I can go out onto LinkedIn and I can find other University of Delaware alumni, but just because I found them and they might connect with me because I put out that invitation, it stops there. And so I think the difference is that you need to be able to make that connection. So for me, how do we have a conversation like we're having now? So like, one of my friends knows Rick, and Rick was nice enough to have me on the show, but that's the kind of thing, is just have that common interest, the common connection, and then work together towards a common goal.
I like that. That's cool. It's, you had brought up earlier the idea that, the schools have different alumni programs, and I get, notifications and that sort of thing. So, one of the things that kind of crosses my mind is, once getting into the program, once, joining Alumni Direct as a student or as an athlete for that matter, I mean, what is expected of me? I mean, we said from the general sense, it's like, paying it forward, but I mean, what in reality is expected of me in order for, I'll say even for me to benefit from that, if that's, if that's the goal.
I think it's to help facilitate those connections because you're starting where you're in the same place that the alumni are there, so you have that first start there, and I think once you're in there, it's starting to post content. We're trying to do different things, like the Athletes Corner is new because we feel like number one is kind of helping the athletes out, but I think a lot of people are attracted to sports as well, and so they might be more likely to kind of zone in on what the athletes are talking about, or maybe connecting if the athlete has a business. And then it's other areas like mentoring. One of the things I've been talking about with some of these other athletes is you've got, some of these players that are playing now, whatever the sport might be in college. And they're all shooting for maybe that professional level. But there's a lot of pitfalls and unfortunately most of them won't make it to that next level. So to hear from somebody who's an alumni athlete to come back and to mentor them and, teach them about social media or help to teach them about financial literacy. I mean, we're trying to do things like that. We're also wanting to facilitate a networking event every month in each community center. And right now it might be Alumni Direct doing it, but hopefully as we're growing these community centers, somebody will be kind of step up from that college and be like, yeah, I'm going to have this networking event. And then the other thing is just there's so many people that have different skill sets. And so like to have somebody talk about in today's society how to get a job and what are the right things to do, how to do a resume. So having that guest speaker on an event that the alumni can tune into. And for me, it's about the fact that we all went to that or are part of that same community versus being across the board. Because like somebody could talk about HR and jobs, and like 20 of us went to different schools, but we're not doing that at Alumni Direct. We're facilitating that direct relationship to their college community or the athlete community in there, and that's what kind of sets it apart. So we're continuing to look at ways to find different content, and as we grow. Whether it might be live streaming of events from a college, whether it might be podcasts that they're done by alumni podcasts, or maybe, there's current students that want a platform where they can provide content. And as an alumni, I'd love to hear what's going on in the school today and different things like that. So we're trying to continually think about content, and obviously it's only as good as the people going in there. So, we're on a mission to grow these communities now because we're kind of young and still somewhat of a startup mode. We're encouraging the people to come in together in groups, because if you come in by yourself, there's not necessarily that value. But if you come in as a group and you start utilizing it and saying, okay, well, let's start talking to each other, let's start maybe advertising your businesses, then that's where the value starts building up. And then obviously the more people that come in, the more resources that people have to connect with.
Got it. So we're getting into the group. We're networking with one another, producing. I didn't quite catch what you meant when you were talking about like producing content.
From our side, on Alumni Direct side, with the content, it's more about one of the things that we've tried to do is create, from a sports perspective, RSS feeds that would feed into our site. So it might be like an ESPN feed or some type of feed from that local market of the college. So it's content that people would want to come out to and say, okay, well, let me check out what's happening daily on campus or in the sports. So things like that. So we're looking for things that create value back to the alumni.
Are colleges getting directly involved with this, or are they like advertising and that sort of endorsing it, or what?
In a perfect world, they would, but there's a lot of challenges with schools, and I think, and a lot of people that you talk to in other types of business as well to try to get into these schools. Part of it, like for us, we've got this platform. Schools may have a similar platform that we have. The difference is they're paying it as a software as a service. So
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a concern on their part that, hey, we're spending maybe $40,000, $50,000 a year on a platform, which they have to administer themselves, the school. So they
Mm-hmm.
have to have the bandwidth and people to administer it. So if they're looking at that, or sometimes they look at it as a competition while you're trying to compete with getting our alumni. And that's really not the case, because my mode has always been, and I've been in sales for many years, is that I believe in that three-way partnership. So for us, it would be, in a perfect world, would be us working with our alumni members, target members, as well as the universities like you bring up. And we always feel that if they come out to Alumni Direct and they have a positive experience, they're more likely to get back to the school. And then other things we're looking at doing as well is to set up influencer programs. So it might be that we work with an alumni association and say, listen, we'll give you a percentage of that monthly membership over a certain period of time for every member that comes through a link for your school. And so imagine these schools that they're always looking for some type of funding. So, if we were to get a school that helped us get 5,000 members, that could be maybe $10,000 a month in revenue that they didn't have, or maybe, I guess you can't call it revenue, but some type of funding stream. So we're looking at different things like that. And I think the schools have asked the question too sometimes. Well, like I talked to one school and they have over 180,000 alumni, but they only have about 7,000 active members on their platform. So that's 173,000 people that aren't utilizing anything. And, for me, it's like, just like LinkedIn or Facebook, people can come out to Alumni Direct and become a member. So if they become a member of ours and we can give the different things and even have the schools providing content or just content for the schools, I think it's a better picture for everyone. And I think the schools can definitely benefit in working with us.
So what do you see, I guess, the future? So you just launched the new podcast. You're focusing more on your athletes. What's the vision for that?
What we're trying to do is, as I kind of mentioned in the beginning, athlete transition is a major problem. And I guess in a sense, from a philanthropic standpoint, it's something I'm passionate about. I played sports growing up. I ran track and cross country in college. I got hurt. I didn't necessarily have the issue of the transition that some of these other people have, but the more and more people that I talked about it, whether it be agents or sports psychologists or athletes themselves, I just see a true area where we can help people out. And I believe that through the podcast and through my dealing with these different people and trying to create these avenues for athletes on Alumni Direct, it's the show kind of might facilitate back to people coming to Alumni Direct and joining it to receive that value, the different help that we're doing. And it's funny, you talk about manifestations, and I talk about this a lot now. And I believe truly down deep and in my heart, and I'm setting this as a goal for myself and the company, that within the next year, Alumni Direct and myself will be on ESPN as one of the leading companies out there trying to help in this athlete transition. So again, back to the philanthropic side, I want to do whatever I can to help as many people, in this case, athletes. And then I think in turn, probably, some of that, not notoriety, I guess that's not the right, some of the awareness that people might get in what we're trying to do, believe in it. And maybe even having somewhere along the line, meeting some major athlete influencer that wants to run arm in arm with me and the company, and not from a perspective of paying them or them paying us, but more of like, hey, this is a great cause. How can we make an impact? And thank you, Alumni Direct, for having that platform where we can put different resources out there. We can have to me, if I can get that athlete transition coach and the sports psychologist, and I could put them on my site and be that conduit for then the athlete to be able to utilize those services, that's something that's really important to me. And I think that's kind of how the whole show and just the movement come back to Alumni Direct.
I love that. Is there like a numerical goal, like a number of people that you want to get on the platform in, say, the next 3-5 years, or is that kind of? Well,
in a perfect world, we could be doing this show in 3 to 5 years, and LinkedIn or Facebook or Google or somebody says, okay, Alumni Direct, you guys are great, we're going to buy you. for a lot of money. But I mean, ultimately, obviously, like anything, I mean, we'd love to have a platform that has, hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And I'm so passionate about helping people. So, I mean, the goal would be to, right now we don't have a lot. So it's, the goal is to start growing it. And I think like anything, if we provide the right place for people to go, it will snowball. And then we could have, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people. I mean, you look at platforms like LinkedIn and Facebook, and granted, a lot of it is free, but they have hundreds of millions of people on their platform. And I don't ever foresee something like that for us, but, to get to the hundreds of thousands or even the millions would be awesome.
Yeah, you mentioned there was an interest. There is a general interest with athletes in terms of working with them. Do you think it's because of their general mindset in terms of approaching things? I know that I have seen a lot of webinars, a lot of talks talking about how elite athletes can be so similar to an entrepreneurial, to having an entrepreneurial mindset. So from the sponsor's perspective, is that what generally comes into play in terms of wanting to work with them?
Yes, in a sense, because all these athletes definitely, regardless of how well they played, they have that mindset. I mean, like I was saying at the beginning, I mean, a lot of these athletes start playing when they're young, and they sacrifice a lot. I mean, even though, like I said, I ran cross country and track, and there was things that I sacrificed socially in high school and maybe a little bit in college, just because of having to practice and having, like meets and all that. But I think what we're seeing, and I've been talking to several different former players, is that there's a tendency for these athletes, the elite athletes, to have the doors open for them pretty simply. I mean, obviously you talk about the Tom Brady's of the world and these other people that they get the endorsements and all that. But what we're finding is that maybe like 90% of the people don't have those avenues. And in talking to some of these former baseball players, they talk about, for them, a big percentage of them don't have that outlet. Even though there's players associations and maybe even alumni groups, there's not a big push necessarily to help them out. Not purposely, but I think they're still concentrating on the higher named athletes. So I think by giving these people a place where they can network and connect, and a lot of them don't know how to do it. I mean, I was talking to a college coach, and he said, or actually it was a sports agent, and he said one of the biggest downfalls he sees from players is that they don't network and connect when they're playing. And he said that's the best time to do it because they're in those circles. Now, once they're out, a lot of these people, whether they were superstars or not, they kind of have that sense of, well, I was an athlete and I should get a 6-figure sales job. And unfortunately, they're not out there because it's not that named athlete. So I think we're trying to do something that maybe other people aren't doing. I mean, there's all types of different platforms and organizations out there, but from what I'm seeing, it doesn't seem like there's a big push to help them out. And then when you look at, say, for example, baseball players, well, let's throw them in an athletes community center where they're with football players and basketball players and golfers and swimmers and hockey players, that they all have that same mindset. They grew up playing sports regardless of what the sport is, but now they're out. So let's kind of band them all together and as a team work together to help them get the different opportunities.
Are you seeing professional athletes interested in what you're doing?
I've had a couple on my show actually, and everybody seems to like this whole alumni aspect of it because the fact that most people are willing to give back, especially the older you get, and so I think some of these athletes realize, the ones that were professional, that they could make an impact on these younger athletes. And it's interesting because some of the people I'm talking to now are like, hey, well, let's not only take it to college, let's take it to the high school level, because, we all know when we're growing up, we're the greatest and, nothing can stop us and we can do everything. And I think if some of these athletes, I think, would definitely resonate to, especially the successful professional athletes, that they're like, wow, I want to be like them. Well, let me give you the school of hard knocks. This is what it took to get there. This is what I had to do as an athlete, what I had to, the sacrifices and all that. But now teaching them the right way to do things. So there's so much. I mean, when we grew up, there wasn't the social media presence like there is now. I mean, things get across, something happens, and 5 minutes later, because someone had a phone with a camera, whether it's negative for the most part or some positive, it's out there. So if there's professional athletes that are helping to guide that, and I think with that question too, Rick, is that when we say professional athlete, it could be like this one guy was a former major league pitcher, but he made it to major. So he was a great player, but he didn't necessarily have that success. He got hurt a lot. So he might not have that name that people would recognize, but he did it. He was a major league baseball player. So for him to go back and talk to minor leaguers or either in colleges or even just minor league baseball players in general, I think can have a positive impact. So that was a long answer of your question, but yeah, I think there's definitely an interest. And I think to be a conduit and have a platform where they can go in that private community per se, where they can work together through different sports, I think is definitely attractive to them.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. I love to hear that. I know giving back has always been something I've been interested in. I've been doing this for I guess about 20 years, and I can't help sometimes just getting on the phone with somebody and just like, okay, well let's go through let's go through, see what you got. So I love that. I love to hear that athletes are doing that too.
Yeah, it's definitely rewarding, and obviously it'll be more rewarding as we grow it. So we're working now to just build that infrastructure and have that create that great experience for them, and then to have the value of the different partners. Like the different resource partners, whether it be the athlete transition coaches or whatever it might be. But I continue to try to think big picture of who can I connect and network with, utilizing my skill set that can in turn help my members, in their lives.
Wow. Curious, as you were saying before, you were saying earlier, that you grew up in sales. I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, as a salesperson, we're I guess taught or bred or whatever to be very financially hungry, if you will. But you're running this organization and you're looking at you use the word like philanthropic, and you talked about like paying it forward. Is there a conflict? Where does that live like in your mind? How do you get? It seems like you swung from like one side of the field to the other side of the field. Tell me about that.
It's interesting. My wife will probably give me hell for that as well. Like, what are you going to do to make money? No, because I honestly believe that, there's the philanthropic side, and obviously as a company, we want to, gain great revenues and be a top-notch company. So that part hasn't gone away. I think it's just that I believe that the more people that we help, and especially in a membership platform. So, if all of a sudden we have 100,000 members, 1 million members, the revenue's there. So what I feel like is in anything I do with networking is that the more that I help, hopefully comes back around. And that's kind of what we look to do.
So you have the podcast, that you guys have kicked off. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, so it's like I said, the premise is teaching inspiring athletes that there is life after sports, and so I've geared it into. I've done 20 plus shows now, and what we look for is
that's a mile marker, dude.
What's that?
That's a mile marker. A lot of people don't get there.
Yeah, that's good. It's kind of like writing a book, right? You write the first chapter if you don't get all the way through. So yeah, I hit that milestone. So. I'm looking for, and obviously the two of you, if you know anybody, Ricky mentioned some professional athletes and all that. I mean, they didn't necessarily have to play professional, could be in college, but it's very inspiring. I did one, I had one podcast where I had a former Major League Baseball player. And honestly, I felt like I was doing an ESPN 30 for 30 because it got real raw and intentional. I mean, he talked about making millions of dollars and then ending up on his van floor, penniless and on drugs and different things like that, and
Yeah.
how his kids kind of brought him out. They looked at their dad as a hero, and now the guy's very successful, keynote speaker and all that. But so I'm looking to get various people. It's one show was pretty cool. I had I don't know if you remember the J Max story. There was a story back in the mid 2000s. There was a high school. It was a basketball team, and their manager had autism, and so he was the manager of the team, and he tried to make the team a bunch of times and didn't never made it. But his senior year, his coach said, "Okay, for senior day, I'm going to suit you up, and if I can get you in the game, I will." And so the game gets down, and they're winning by a lot. So the coach puts him in, and the crowd was so behind this kid. They made those like the things you hold up, and kind of like when you're at like the paddles that had the kid's picture on and all that. And so his first he takes his first shot and he misses a 3-pointer, misses the second one, then he hits 6 straight 3-pointers and another one. He ends up being the leading scorer of the team that game. Everybody goes crazy. He ended up winning an ESPY award that year against Kobe Bryant, his hero, for the best sports story. And so what this coach who I had on the show, that was the high school coach, and he's gone on to write books and he's a keynote speaker and all that. But it's something that's the stories that are out there just really, some of them really hit home. And I actually, when I watched ahead of time, because I kind of vaguely remembered the story, but then I watched it on the website before I did the show with this coach. And I mean, it brought me to tears. And I mean, I think that some of these stories just really impact you. I mean, these, and it's all across all sports, which is really cool. So it's not, and it's funny too, because as I do this more, I mentioned I ran cross country and track, and a lot of people, and it's changed differently now, but I think a lot of people don't necessarily look at that as a sport, even though it is a sport. And I mean, it's changed because of sprinters. You got Hassan Bolt and all these, and then cross country and marathoners and all that. But it does make sense to me. So I kind of think about my journey, which, as I mentioned, wasn't as stressful because I was okay with being done with it. But as I hear these stories, I want to help not only these people that are on my show, but I see how they can help impact others. This one guy was a former college football player, and he tells the story about, hey, I got done. I moved back into my childhood home. I lived in my room. I partied with my friends. I was kind of spiraling down the wrong avenue. And, but then he kind of changed courses, and now he's an athlete transition coach. He's written some books. He's also does a fantastic podcast. So I'll give out a shout to him. His name's Taj Deshawn. And he does he's done an athlete's entrepreneur book, and then also Thrive After Sports, great podcast. You might want to check it out. So I'll send this out to Taj. You can promote your show as well. But the bottom line is I'm meeting a lot of interesting people, and the more I meet them, the more I want to help them and impact others around them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It just dawns on me, it's like, you're an athlete, from, as you said, the time you're very, very young, kind of identifies you. And then, when that ends, whether that's after college, after that's, perhaps even after high school, but, after that professional career, it's like, who am I? And that opportunity to, do that downward spiral. I mean, it's just, it's realistic. It happens in every time we have a major life. The opportunity, I should say, is there every time there's a major life change. Hey, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. This was great. This was fun. Learned a lot. We'll definitely connect you with JR. JR's he's got a great show, and he's got a lot of he's a great guy, and he's got a lot of great people on his show. So I definitely want to make that connection. One thing I would ask you to do is when you connect with, give us, if someone wants to connect with you or learn a little bit more about how they might join, Alumni Direct, or, even be on your show, how would they connect with you in order to do so?
Yeah, well, you can find us. Our website is alumnidirect.com, and you can follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those. And, I think a good thing would be if you go out, and on our Alumni Direct YouTube page, you can see the actual the podcast, or we're on Anchor, so we're on all the different podcasts. But I encourage people to watch and listen, and then, to come out to Alumni Direct and try it out and come with a group of fellow alumni. And then, hopefully those alumni will know other alumni, obviously, and it will be something that will grow, that can truly impact a lot of lives.
That's cool. That's cool. We'll make sure we get a bunch of links from you and get them on the show notes. So anybody that visits the show, watches the show, they'll be able to see and connect with you. So that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Folks, thank you so much for listening to or watching another episode of Epiphany Off the Cuff. Don't forget, please like and share. Share with your friends and family. I'm sure they'd love it as well. Take care and have a great one. Thanks for watching another episode of Epiphany Off the Cuff. Please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when the next episode is going to drop. Don't forget, we're on podcasts as well, so you can catch us on your favorite podcasting platforms. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Epiphany Off the Cuff.